All right. So we have an amazing guest today that's been on one heck of a journey that gosh, he's done this journey twice now, and we'll get into this in just a moment. But we have best-selling author, fitness trainer, just fitness entrepreneur, and just really expert in all areas fitness, and just a cool human. And we got the pleasure to chat a little bit offline and share our Hawaiian roots. We both live in Hawaii and have roots here for a long, long time. And that was so much fun to chat about. But we have Drew Manning on the show. Aloha, Drew.
Aloha. Thank you, Dr. Thomas, for having me on.
Oh my gosh. Pleasure is mine, man. I'm so pumped to have this interview. I've been thinking about this for a long time. And I just appreciate, sharing the time zones with you and just being able to chat with a fellow Hawaiian, really just kind of get into this a little bit. Let's just start out with a little bit of the backstory. I think a lot of folks know that, I think it's been almost a decade since your first Fit to Fat journey, but a little bit about how that got started and then why you did it a second time at around 40 years old, the Fit to Fat to fit, and then to fat, and then 40, and then fit again. I mean, you look amazing. I just can't wait to hear sort of what prompted, the first, and then of course the second time around this whole journey. So anyway, let us know.
Yeah. So when I first did it in 2011, the idea came from me being a trainer and someone who had never been overweight a day in my life. Like most trainers, I was in shape. I kind of knew, I had the knowledge of how to get in shape, right? And, I had my clients would struggle to stay consistent with eating healthy and exercising. And for me, my whole life has always been easy. I'm like, look, you guys, put down the junk food, you go to the gym, like it's not that hard. You just do it, right? And so I had a client at that time tell me, Drew, you don't understand how hard it is for me or for people like me, because for you, it's been easy your whole life. But for me and for us, it's really, really hard. And so I kind of took that to heart. He was my brother-in-law at the time. And I was like, you know what, maybe he's right. Maybe there's something I'm missing. I don't understand why it's so hard for people. It seems so easy and simple in my mind. And then I was thinking of ideas, and boom, this idea of getting fat on purpose. I know it sounds crazy and ridiculous. It kind of like made sense in my mind. And it almost felt like a calling to do this crazy experiment. And so I checked with my wife at the time. I talked to all my friends. I'm like, you guys, I had this revelation. What do you guys think about this? And everyone's like, yeah, you should totally do it. The one person who didn't want me to do it was my mom, though. She was scared for my health. But I did it anyways, right? We don't listen to our moms all the time. So I did it anyways with the idea of, okay, maybe this will give me a better understanding. And it was by far one of the hardest, most humbling things I had ever done up until that point. Because for 6 months, I stopped exercising, which that in and of itself was a mental trip for me to not exercise for the first time in my life, and completely let myself go. And I wanted to do something different than Morgan Spurlock's Supersize Me, right?
Yeah.
Where he ate fast food, McDonald's every day for 30 days. I wanted to focus on everyday typical American foods that we grew up with in the 70s and 80s that sometimes we think is kind of healthy for us, right? The way it's marketed to us. So a lot of like processed, sugary cereals and sugary sodas and chips and cookies and crackers and like Hot Pockets and, Top Ramen and SpaghettiOs and all these delicious foods that we have that are super affordable, right? They're super cheap. They're very convenient. And I'll be totally honest with you, Dr. Thomas, they taste freaking amazing. Like Cinnamon Toast Crunch is like my drug. Like it's like, it's so good. And so I better understood why people gravitated towards that food after having eaten it for 6 months. So I gained 75 pounds in 6 months. Like I said, it was one of the hardest, most humbling things I've ever done. I learned so many valuable lessons from it. And it taught me a lot about the mental and emotional side of transformation, which is what I'll get into in a little bit. But it really opened up my eyes, and it was very humbling, like I said. And this story went viral in 2011, 2012. Like I was on every TV show, Dr. Oz, Good Morning America.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Drew, Jay Leno had me on. It was really, really a trip. It was really cool. And then fast forward 10 years, first of all, I swore I would never do it again because I was so humbled. I was so humbled. And then 2020 happened. 2020 was a crazy year for all of us with the pandemic and, the political unrest and the riots and the division in the country. And ever since that first experiment, the one message that I tried to get across that I had learned was the importance of empathy. Empathy is the ability to listen, to understand someone instead of listening to respond, which is what I think most humans do, is we listen to respond and correct and judge. versus listening to understand. And ever since that first experiment, empathy's become a big part of my life, because there's a quote by oh shoot, Franklin, I think, or Teddy Roosevelt. He said, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And that really resonated with me with my Fit to Fat to Fit story. And so that kind of carried into my 2020. And I thought, man, we suck as a society with empathy, with empathizing with other people. We're so quick to judge. We're so quick to divide ourselves from someone else that might have a different political belief or religious belief. And I felt like empathy was this thing that could bring us all together. And I really still do think, I still do think that it can. And so I thought, I almost felt called to do it again a second time in 2020, because the first time social media wasn't what it is today. Like social media with live streaming and TikTok and Insta stories, people's ability to see the journey as it was happening, it just wasn't there in 2011. People had heard about it after the fact or saw a couple of YouTube videos, but I wanted to do it again as a 40-year-old to give people in that age demographic some hope and let them know that, yeah, it might be harder as you get older, but it's still possible. And then also to spread the message of more empathy, not just in the fitness industry, but hopefully it would carry over into more empathy just in the world in general, because I felt like it was something that we needed at the time. And so I felt called to do it again a second time, as crazy as that sounds.
Yeah, I know, that's insane. And I think, wow, I'm actually, when I first heard about you years ago when you did this, I thought, wow, that's actually really cool that he would do that and then have that journey and really be able to, like you said, have the empathy and appreciation for where people are coming from. Because I think it matters so much to really know. You can say that you walked in those shoes. I mean, I was watching the videos just kind of in prep for this, reminding myself, like, holy crap, like what a trip. And then the fact that you did it again, which I'm grateful that you did it, because I'm actually turning 50 next year, and I don't have to do this, because I've thought about it before, and I definitely don't want to do it, especially now that you've done it twice and you've got all this experience, you're sharing it. I got you on the show. I definitely don't want to do it myself, but I so appreciate the fact that you went through this a second time, even a decade later. And I'm just curious, like from your perspective, Drew, like what was it easier in a way because you knew what to expect? Was it harder the second time? Like tell me about that a little bit. I'm just curious.
That's a really good question. I'll be totally honest with you. It was harder in the sense that, I went into it a little bit cocky, thinking, oh, I got this. I've done this before. I know what to expect. But this time around, it was a different life situation. The first time around, I was married, had two very young kids. They were 2 years old and like a newborn during my first experiment.
Wow.
Fast forward 10 years, I had been divorced for about 5 years or so. Was in a relationship, had a girlfriend. We were in a relationship for a little over a year and a half at the time. My daughters were 9 and 11, so a little bit older. So just totally different situation. Going into the journey, I was like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. And yeah, there was parts of it that were kind of easier. I will say I had done a lot of inner work on myself at that time. Therapy after my divorce. I left my religion around the same time as my divorce. And so my self-esteem was totally different than what it was before. And I really embraced the dad bod this time around versus the first time. I was very self-conscious because the wake-up call for me was I had a huge identity crisis in 2011 because I've never been overweight. And I freaked out. I wanted to go up to people in public, complete strangers, and like explain to them why I was overweight. I'm like, hey, this isn't me. Here's my before picture. This isn't what I look like normally. Because I was so uncomfortable being overweight, because my identity was based on my body image as my self-image. And that really messed with my head until I did, lots of therapy and life coaching and meditation and realized there was more to me than my body. So going into it, I felt like I was more of a healed person, to where gaining the weight didn't really affect me. I totally rocked the dad bod and took my shirt off all the time. I just didn't care. And I had a lot more self-love going into it. But the thing that really rocked me was I went through a really, really hard breakup with my girlfriend in the middle of my journey. And it really shook me to where I was eating the food before to gain the weight, right? It was part of my journey. Now I was eating the food to deal with my emotions of loneliness, sadness, depression, dealing with a real life situation that I couldn't just push pause. I couldn't just like, oh, let me not do this journey. I still had to finish the journey. And now eating the Ben and Jerry's ice cream, drinking the wine and the chocolate was there to kind of mask the emotional pain that I was feeling. And it really opened up my eyes to the power of emotional eating and why people gravitate towards food as this drug to numb the pain or distract us from the pain that we're experiencing in life. Because it's so interesting. I really developed more empathy, which I didn't think I could, for those that struggle with emotional eating. Because here's what happens as humans, Dr. Thomas. I'm sure you know this, but people listening, I want them to be aware of why people gravitate towards food and become emotional eaters. Is because, first of all, as humans, we're emotional creatures, and we don't like to experience negative emotions. We don't like emotional pain. And so in this 21st century world that we live in, going through a breakup, going through divorce or financial issues, or social media, whatever the thing that causes you stress, we don't like to deal with that. So we like to numb the pain or distract ourselves from pain. And food, unfortunately, is probably the most accessible drug to do that, because you eat Ben and Jerry's ice cream, you get a dopamine hit, right? Your body releases dopamine. You feel a temporary sense of relief of like, oh, I feel better temporarily. And so it's like, oh, I can do that multiple times per day and receive multiple dopamine hits. And food, like I said, it's legal. You can buy it anywhere you want. It's not like some illegal drug you have to go find on the streets. So I understand and empathize with people that struggle with emotional eating, because if you train your brain to go towards a substance multiple times per day, day after day, month after month, year after year for decades, and then try and willpower your way to be like, okay, I'm not going to eat sugar anymore. I'm not going to eat junk food anymore. Well, the emotional pains of life still come. And now that your brain is trained to reach for that, some type of dopamine hit from food, your body, your brain is going to kind of like push you towards that drug, just like a drug addict would do, of like, hey, I need my fix. And people can't understand why they can't just willpower their way or discipline their way out of living an unhealthy lifestyle. And then they get stuck in these ruts and these vicious cycles of like, how can I overcome this? And so it really opened up my eyes the second time around to the power of emotional eating.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And in a way, I think you expressed this a little bit earlier when you said maybe this was actually part of your calling to experience this, because it was different the second time. And you did have that component of the emotional eating that was a real thing. And it's what I, affectionately call kind of the dealing rather than healing approach, which we often do from time to time. We have so many different stressors, so many things that come our way. And sometimes just to kind of get through it, we deal by, the Ben and Jerry's every night. I did that actually for several decades. I would eat ice cream. Like my kids could like clock it out. Okay, it's 9 p.m. Tom, dad's going to be sitting on the couch, eating his ice cream, watching the surf channel or whatever. That was my kind of way to decompress after a chaotic day in the hospital or what have you. Sit down, and it felt good. I'll be honest with you. Like to this day, I actually love ice cream to this day. I rarely eat it. I certainly don't eat it daily, but when I do, I freaking love it. Like I take a bite, I savor it. That the creamier, the better, the richest, creamiest, like I'm all about that. Ben and Jerry's, dude, I'll tell you, that's one of my favorites. I'll go for that every time. Haagen-Dazs, cookie dough, like I'm all over it. But what I learned in the process, I was actually chatting with, and it sounds like you did as well before, Dr. Drew, who's into the whole habit loop and how to break the habit cycle. And he actually talked to me about it. He's like, dude, so tell me, describe that first bite of ice cream. What is it like? And then, I told him, and so what about the second bite? What about the third bite? Does it ever change? And it did. I'm like, holy crap, you're right. By like the fifth or sixth bite, I honestly don't really need to eat it anymore. Like I've had all the pleasurable sensations, but then you just start, you just keep powering through. And, I'd eat the whole, carton back in the day. And so I get that part. And I think for you to have that experience, to really see what it's like to do, like you said, emotional eating, like what a way to really break through with your clients, to really go, I get that. And it's not, Drew, and you know this very well, it's not that people don't know how to eat healthier. They don't know that they need to move their body. It's not about that. There's often scars, there's healing that has to take place. And to go back and do that, you have to, it's not about just telling people, oh, eat this and don't eat that. Like that's kind of simple. I mean, we do that because some people just don't know that seed oils are bad, for example, but there's just a lot more to it. And well, how grateful I am that you've had this opportunity to really dive deep, to have the experience, and now to really share with the world your understanding of that, really, really heavy piece, which is that emotional connection and how you can overcome, and the image and the self-worth. And it sounds like you were well prepared, even despite, this unplanned, right, breakup that happened. I'm assuming it was very unplanned. And I'm sure going in, you wouldn't have decided to do a second round if you knew that was going to happen. Cause holy crap, double whammy, right?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
speak to that part a little bit, that I think the second loop around, when you had these real, revelations, if you will, of how the emotional component played in your body image and your self-worth, just speak to that a little bit more, the lessons you learned going through that second lap.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me expand on that a little bit, because this is kind of the missing component that happens in the fitness industry is we're so focused on the physical aspect of weight loss. Like, what are my macros? What are my calories?
How many calories? Yeah. All the usual.
Like, what are my workouts? And people go into it thinking, okay, I'm just going to focus on that. But like I said, we're emotional creatures. The emotional pains of life don't stop for us just because we're on a weight loss journey. And so people go into this fitness world and this physical transformation world thinking it's just going to be physical, not even really realizing the emotional, ups and downs and roller coasters that they're going to deal with trying to eat certain foods. And what I tell people is your ability to do the physical stuff, diet, exercise, that kind of stuff, is determined by your mental and emotional state. And so if you're struggling mentally and emotionally with traumas, challenges from the past that you haven't overcome yet, you haven't healed those wounds, and you just try and willpower your way to a new healthy lifestyle, sure, the David Goggins of the world can push their bodies through anything, and maybe a small percentage of people can do that. But I think the majority of people still don't understand how to break those cycles, if you will. And I think a lot of a big part of it has to do with self-awareness, because these foods that we mentioned, like ice cream, I don't want people to sure, there's less healthy foods and there's more healthy foods, but I don't like the idea of good or bad, because ice cream isn't necessarily bad. It's your intention behind why you want to eat the ice cream. Are you eating the ice cream because you're feeling lonely, because you're feeling sad, because you're feeling stressed, and you look for that thing to fix that negative emotion? Or, are you, maybe having a pint of ice cream that you haven't had in 6 months, and it's a Friday night and you're with your spouse and you're having a date night and you both are savoring, enjoying the ice cream as a couple, where that your intention behind it is a little bit different versus by yourself at midnight, stuffing your face, crying because of you went through a breakup. It's it's different, and your intention is everything. And so that's another part of this journey that I want to let people know about is being aware of why you do what you do. And if you could figure out why you do what you do and what your triggers are behind your reactions to certain stressors, then from there you can be more in control. There's a really good quote by Anthony DeMello, and he says, what you're aware of, you're in control of, and what you're not aware of is in control of you. So as you become more self-aware of why you do what you do and what your triggers are, then you can more thoughtfully respond in the moment to those stressors and those triggers, versus in the past, you probably would have just reacted and grabbed the ice cream and ate the whole pint and been like, oh, damn it, why did I do that again? Like, why do I keep doing this? And you haven't figured it out yet. But as you become more self-aware and realize that, okay, this stems from this childhood trauma, this abandonment wound, or not being loved enough, or whatever it is. And anytime you go through a stressor in life, like, your kids are driving you crazy, or you get into a fight with your spouse, or you're having financial issues, and those things trigger you to feel some negative emotions, and you're not really understanding why you're feeling that way in the first place, and you just react, then what you're not aware of is controlling you in that situation. And so a big component to overcome any kind of addiction, or if you want to change your life in any way, self-awareness is the key. And so that's why, I don't just focus on, which diet to follow or which workout program to do, because that's not what people struggle with. That'll fix that's like a Band-Aid over a bullet hole type of situation. But if you can really do the inner work, that's what I tell people, working in is just as important, if not more important, than working out when it comes to our physical health, mental and emotional and spiritual health. So
Yeah,
hopefully that makes sense.
yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's often the missing link with a lot of the health influencers, trainers, fitness folks, that they just get all wrapped up in the mechanics. It's very mechanical. You eat
Yes.
this certain kind of diet, you don't eat these foods, you only eat those foods, you work out this certain way, you build muscle mass. Like, I agree with all that stuff, but a lot of it can't continue for, millennia and decades if we don't have that, like you said, the grasp on what's kind of making us tick. If we don't understand the background, how we can decide for ourselves, what triggers us? Like, why do we do that one thing? Whether it be, for me, it was eating ice cream every night. Like, I had to go back and kind of think, well, why did I do that? Well, yes, I do love ice cream, but it was also a way to just deal with the trauma of the day. I mean, literal or physical or emotional, whatever that was. Like, it just felt good to kind of like, to do that. And so identifying those triggers and doing the inner work, I think is so important. And it's a missing piece in a lot of the fitness programs out there, is they don't really focus on that. They just teach the mechanics. And I think you not only live in it, which gave you the empathy, but also just that true kind of understanding of, hey, I got you. I get it. Like, this is something that it's normal. What I love to tell people is, what? Those cravings are freaking normal. You're human.
Yes.
You are not broken. You are not, worthless. You are not, some people think it's low self-esteem. Some people think they just don't have self-control. I'm like, no, it's none of that. It's none of that. You're a perfect human. You are perfectly, your body is perfect. It's beautiful. And maybe your metabolism is temporarily broken, but guess what? You can fix that. It's okay.
Yes.
Like, you as a human are not broken. You're amazing. Yeah. You'd be surprised. And I think you put it through the ultimate test, and twice. Like, look at what the body can freaking do. I mean, it can go up by 75 or so pounds and drop and go from, it's insane what you put your body through in a second time. And I want to switch gears a little bit, because I think just from a sort of health and fitness standpoint, I'd love to kind of hear your experience with some of these things that we think about, right? As far as biomarkers and other types of things that I think other folks will have interest in. But I think that, the first thing I want to leave people with is that, like you said, like, this is something that is more than just mechanical. Like, your body is your spiritual as much as your physical, your emotional. These are pieces that are so important to not just deal with, but to heal. There's healing that needs to take place. And so now that we switch gears, let's talk a little bit about the physical stuff, because I think a lot of people want to know, like, dude, you put your body through this, the second lap, and you got a lot of, data on it, which I think is really, really cool, especially as a kind of geek nerd, physician that I am. I love the data. And I've heard you kind of share this before. And I know there's some nuance, and there's some things that surprised you and some things that maybe didn't, but the body, I think, number one, is so miraculous. It can come back. And I think you give that comeback story. Like, you know what, your body, you wouldn't believe it at the time. I mean, you were up almost 80 pounds. Like, you went back to where you were. Like, who would have thought at 40 years old? Like, most people, at least a lot of friends of mine, they think that you hit 40 and it's freaking over the hill. It's all downhill. Like, forget it. Like, there's guys that tell me they're not going to surf anymore. And I'm like, how could you not surf anymore? Like, I don't even get that. I'm going to surf till I'm 100. So what was the biggest surprise, I think, from a physical standpoint for you, as far as whether it be biomarkers or maybe it was more challenging in a physical way? What was the biggest surprise that you had the second lap, when you were actually looking at biomarkers and things like that?
Yeah, there was so much, because I did a little tiny experiment as I gained the weight and then as I lost the weight, because I wanted to really expose 4 different fad diets, or 4 different popular diets, and kind of show people that just because you're doing a diet doesn't necessarily mean that you're becoming healthier. And so what I mean by that is I kind of focus on keto, paleo, vegan, and vegetarian. And what I wanted to do with those 4 approaches is kind of show the good side and also the downside, right? The pitfalls and mistakes that people make when jumping into one of these popular diets. So as I gained the weight, I actually did a dirty version of keto, paleo, vegan, vegetarian, and I worked with my doctor to do blood work before and after. Now, obviously, just to put this into some context, what I did in the 4 months of gaining weight and the 4 months of losing weight is kind of what people do over the course of like 5 to 10 years, right? Yeah. No one does 4 months of 62 pounds and then losing it over the course of 4 months. Like, I get that. But what I wanted to do was show people that give them kind of a reflection of themselves as I was doing this experiment of like, this is why people fall into these traps or these pitfalls. And what I did was, when any kind of a diet becomes popular, marketing companies out there just kind of like jump on board and then push all these products that fit into those categories, if you will. And then they push these products because here's the problem. As a society, we gravitate towards these comfort foods that just make us feel good emotionally, like we talked about. So whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, or vegetarian, you're going to have keto pizzas and keto ice creams and vegan cookies and vegan donuts and things that fit into those categories that we think, oh, well, at least I'm having a vegan cookie instead of a regular cookie. So it's healthier for me. And then you got breads and pastas and sodas and candies that fit into those categories. And so people tend to eat that food majority of the time versus whole foods. So, even on keto and paleo and what I did was kind of focus on those dirty versions of those foods and ate that majority of the time. And I still was in a caloric surplus. So let me just put that out there too. I was still eating like 5,000 calories. And then one of the cool things that surprised me was my triglyceride levels. So even though I was eating 5,000 calories on dirty keto, my triglycerides as a baseline before I started my journey, I think were 47.
Which is epic. That's an amazing number for the folks that don't know. I mean, if you can get your triglycerides below 100, you're freaking crushing it. So that's a really amazing place to start. Yeah, keep going.
Yep. And then, my first experiment was with dirty keto. So I was eating like Cool Whip and lots of like pastrami and salami and like lunch meats, and then lots of, heavy cream, butter, cheese. Like, I'm not saying those foods are bad, but what I mean is like in excess, when people just eat butter, bacon, and cheese all day long, and eating these keto cookies and keto ice creams, right, that exist out there. Mm-hmm. My triglycerides went from 47 to about 71, so not terrible. Still
71, still pretty freaking good. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I did dirty paleo, and what I mean by dirty paleo was just like the paleo granolas, the paleo bars, like those Lara bars, which do taste good, but like it just these processed foods that still fit into that category. And then it went to like 130. With dirty paleo. Dirty vegan is where it got scary because a lot of people don't know that Oreos are vegan, technically. So you could eat all the Oreos you want and be like, I'm vegan. And they jumped to about 430 doing dirty vegan. And then I did dirty vegetarian, which is pretty much the same as dirty vegan, except you could have, cheese and things like that and some dairy. So, lots of mac and cheese was included in that one. And it jumped up to like 540 or something like that, which was very, very surprising. And then on the flip side of the experiment, when I lost the weight, I vowed to do these diets in a healthy way to show people like, hey, if you're going to do one of these diets, here's probably the best way to do them. And it's basically a whole food based approach to those diets. Lots of, produce and, keto and paleo, lots of like healthy meats, grass fed, and then, vegan, vegetarian. I kind of just focused on, high quality vegetables and legumes and things like that. And you'll see, and I was in a caloric deficit. So around 2,000 calories across the board. So a lot less calories, but still kind of did my blood work. And yeah, it's pretty surprising how, doing it the right way, no matter which diet I did, had positive benefits. I lost weight. My blood markers were really good within range in all four of those categories. And just kind of showing people, look, like to each their own, right? If you find a certain way of eating is better for you, then cool. I'm not dogmatic about my approach to, health and nutrition. I think there's no one size fits all approach. I think at the end of the day, I would just say, no matter what way of eating you subscribe to, try and focus on mostly whole foods instead of gravitating towards the comfort foods.
Yeah, no, and there's a lot of, I think it makes sense. I mean, just from a, if you want to think physiology and whatnot, anytime you process anything, there's going to be not only more inflammation downstream as a side effect, but also it's going to be less pure. It's going to have less nutrients. I mean, everything sort of gets a little worse with processing. If you can eat the whole foods, like you said, the single ingredient stuff, whether it be paleo, whether it be carnivore or vegan, vegetarian, if you just eat the whole foods, no matter which of those you pick, you can be so much healthier than the average person. Because right now, the average person, let's just put it out there, guys, you don't want to be average. The average person in this country, in the US of A, is overweight. 60+% of us are overweight. 90% of us are metabolically unhealthy. So you don't want to be the normal person. You want to be the weirdo, right? The outlier that's healthy. And the number one way to get there is just eat whole foods, whatever that is for you, whatever plan. I just tell people, whatever works for you, if you're thriving on that, I'm not going to change it. I'm not going to say, no, you should switch to this because this diet is better, this approach. No way. Everybody's different. And that's why I think, and I can't wait, Drew, till we get more data out there, but we have, of course, these individuals that live in these very isolated places that have had very, very different diets, some completely plant-based, others completely animal-based, and they're both very healthy. Like the Inuits up north. I mean, those guys eat nothing but, fat and blubber and very little, if any, vegetables, right? And they're super healthy. They don't get heart disease and all of that. Then you have the converse of that are eating a lot of the tubers and just whole plant foods, and they're also very healthy. So I'm not going to, be dogmatic either. And I think whatever people are using, as long as it's a whole food approach, I don't have any problems with that. And if they're thriving, dude, thrive, like eat whatever makes you thrive. And it's not going to be those dang Oreo cookies, even though they sure do taste good. I'm with you, man. It's like a freaking drug, man. You eat Oreos, is like, I mean, they're just going to taste good. I get it. And I might have an Oreo once in a blue moon, or maybe if it's like on my kid's birthday and they want to have cookies and cream, I'm going to have a scoop of that too. I'm not going to go for seconds, but I'm going to have a scoop of that too. So I think the thing that, like you said, it's the whole foods approach that is super important. What was very profound, I think, is those numbers that you shared, the triglycerides. And I hope you didn't get gallstones in the process, because as those numbers shoot up.
Luckily, I did not.
Thankfully, you were there for a short time. I think if you were there for years, that's where people really get into trouble with things like that, because triglycerides is one of the telltale sort of things that lead to problems like gallstones and type 2 diabetes and all these kinds of things. It's triglycerides. You get those down and you're going to be way more healthy. There's this triglyceride to HDL ratio, which I'm sure you're very familiar with.
Yes.
And so you want your triglycerides as low as possible, basically, and your HDL as high as possible. And I think you had some shifts in your HDL as well. Maybe speak to that quickly before we move to the next thing. I think that was another thing you monitored, right?
Yeah, I did. And I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but anytime you're adding in some healthy fats, your HDL most likely is going to go up. And so even on my dirty, keto and paleo experiments, my HDL was still within really good range. I would say it dropped slightly in vegan, vegetarian, because I wasn't eating as much healthy fats. On the clean version of those diets, it did kind of stay within range. But yeah, I'm a big proponent, like you said, of the HDL to triglyceride ratio as something to look into. And people sometimes just don't look at those numbers. They kind of just focus on their LDL as like, oh my gosh, my LDL, my total cholesterol is elevated. I'm unhealthy. I need to change everything. Keto is not for me. Carnivore is not for me. Like, because of just that one number. And so there's a lot more that you can look into when it comes to that. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's something that I kind of I preach to people as well. You got to look at those numbers beyond just the LDL, the bad cholesterol, if you will.
For sure. And actually, a lot of physicians have this wrong, because we've been sort of, I have empathy for them, because I came from that background. We were trained to only focus primarily on the LDL, because we thought that was the issue. I mean, LDL is not the issue. LDL is just one marker. We got to look at the whole picture. And so the HDL, the triglyceride ratio, is actually much more helpful. Basically, you want your HDL as high as possible. Like in my case, mine, for a time, I haven't checked it in a few months, it was up to 90, my HDL. My triglycerides were like 40, something like yours. And so my ratio was above 2, which is freaking, my HDL was double what my triglycerides were, which was pretty darn amazing. And my LDL was still in range. It was less than 100, but it was higher than you might think for, whatever a healthy person is. If you just want to put this, put it out to physicians, or what number should your LDL be? They're always going to say less than 100, because that's just what they've used as this point where they decide, oh, maybe we'll put you on a statin, if it's above 100 or whatever. And I'd be cautious to just go that route. I would say stick to a whole foods diet first, see what you can do with improving your diet, and don't jump to these medications unless you have a familial situation where you really need it. Because in some people, they do need it. But I've just found that a lot of people really don't, but they don't know the options. They don't know there's another choice out there. But the other thing I think you have mentioned in other interviews of the past, you've talked about testosterone levels and how those were affected by your weight gain and all that. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And I would say for the women out there, just because we're going to talk briefly about testosterone, It's really important because you probably have a man in your life, and this will actually make a lot of sense. But think of the analogous changes that would happen in a female hormone situation. I promise you, as you get less metabolically healthy, your female hormones also don't do well, and they can improve in the same way that Drew's improved when he lost all the weight. So speak to testosterone just for a bit. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing that up because I feel like this is one thing that I was trying to show people in my second journey is that when you live a certain lifestyle, an unhealthy lifestyle, lack of exercise, not really focusing on your diet, you're just eating whatever, you think it's only going to affect your amount of fat mass that you have. Like, and if that's all it did, it wouldn't be that bad for you, but it really affects you at your core of who you are and how you show up in your relationships with your spouse, with your loved ones, your kids, your employees, your business, whatever it is. Everything is affected by your physical health more than you think it is, including your hormones, for example, like testosterone. So if you're drinking a few beers before you go to bed at night, you're eating the Ben and Jerry's ice cream, and then your sleep is affected, right? Your ability to sleep efficiently through the night. And I track that using my Whoop, which was very interesting because my HRV, I think, was upwards close to 100. And then it dropped below, I think, 40. It was down to 37,
Wow.
as I was eating this food. And so, not sleeping through the night, first of all, affects you more than you think, your hormone production. So my testosterone, I think it was like 600 when I started. So decent range. And then it dropped to the low 200s. I actually think it dropped below 200 at one point, which is scary as
That's a big
even
drop,
the first time when I did it as a 31-year-old, same thing. It was very, very low. And if your testosterone as a male is low, your ability to handle certain stressors in your life is affected. Like your ability to, show up your best self when you and your spouse are in an argument, it's affected by your hormone levels and how well you're sleeping through the night. And so I really wanted to show people that of how you show up is affected by, all these other things that maybe you don't think about. And so, my testosterone levels dropped pretty significantly during my fit experiments that I did. And that's what I wanted to show people is like that affects you at your core of how you show up. It affects your personality, affects your energy levels, affects your cortisol as well. If your cortisol is constantly elevated and you're trying to be patient with your kids, like let's just be honest, like it's out of your control by that point. Like your fuse is shortened when you're when you're sleep deprived. And any new parent knows this. Like if you have a newborn baby and you're not sleeping through the night for like 6 months straight, I mean, you're constantly in survival mode. You're not the best version of you. Your cortisol's through the roof all day long. You're not sleeping well. Anything kind of sets you off. And anyone that's experienced that knows that. And so you doing that to yourself by eating unhealthy food, not exercising, not getting proper sleep, it's going to affect your hormones, which then it will affect your ability to show up in your relationships in your life. And, I'm not saying I broke up because of this experiment, but I'm saying it didn't help the cause with with how I was showing up during the experiment, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, you definitely made it harder for yourself, right? I mean, the odds were definitely stacked against you when you were in the, gain weight cycle because, like you said, your hormones were not optimized. In fact, they literally, I mean, what you showed us with your testosterone, that would be what I would call a precipitous drop, like they fell off a cliff. I mean, from 600 plus to less than 200, like that's a big freaking drop for a very short amount of time. And then I would love you to talk about the flip side, how quickly that rebound, because there's a lot of dudes out there who have low T, but a lot of it I've found in my experience working with people can be reversed significantly without any kind of supplemental testosterone, just by changing up, dietary things, exercise, movement things, sleep things, stress things, changing all those things up. I've seen significant rebound. So I'm curious, how quickly did yours bounce back as you lost the weight and started to lift again and do all those things? Like how quickly did that happen?
Yeah, it's actually pretty interesting. My doctor, he told me when he was doing my blood work, he's like, look, your body's pretty resilient. And the fact that you're only doing this for, you're only doing this for 4 months, is probably good, because if you kept this up for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, then we're going to get into serious trouble. And that's kind of the patients that he sees is like people, in their 50s and 60s who have lived this way for decades now, trying to fix themselves. But I would say within 30 days, just changing your diet, living a healthy lifestyle, getting enough sleep, managing your stress, exercising, getting enough, sunlight, vitamin D, proper supplementation, and then, whole foods, like we mentioned, your body can heal itself pretty remarkably. Now, my situation is different than other people's situation. I was only out of shape, overweight for 4 months, not 4 years or 4 decades, like some people might be. And so your body's ability to bounce back or heal itself might take longer. And I really do want to stress, like, my situation is not the same as everyone's situation. Like, I didn't grow up overweight. I wasn't obese for years or decades, so it's not the same. I don't want to pretend it's the same. But like I said, what I did in a short period of time represents what other people can do over time. And so your body's ability to heal itself is remarkable. If you give it a chance and you live right consistently, your body will heal itself and fix it. I think, after 30 days, 60 days of eating healthy, living a healthy lifestyle, everything pretty much was pretty much back to normal within a month or two.
Yeah. And I can tell you that, working with people that have had, these struggles for decades, their body is still amazingly resilient. I mean, it may not be 30 days that all of their biomarkers are, totally normalized, but you do see significant changes in 30 days, and 60, even more changes, 90 days, even more. So as you stick with it, because you've done the emotional work, you've done that self-worth work that Drew talked about earlier, you can keep these kinds of things up, because that's what we really want for those of you that are listening. We want this to be something that you can do forever, be healthy forever, because not only you'll feel better, I think you just alluded to this briefly, and I'd love to hear just a little bit more about it, but not just the physical health, but how much more did you recognize with respect to, let's say, your mental health, your emotional health, as you got your hormones back into balance, with the eating whole foods, starting to move your body again? Like, how much did that affect your day-to-day mental capacity, emotional capacity to deal with stressors? Like, let's just speak to that kind of mental health aspect of health, and how that is actually something that ties in beautifully with that. Speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, it's all so connected. And this is what I told people, is even when I was gaining the weight, I still practiced meditation. I still did my positive affirmations. I still did my journaling. But the way I describe it to people is, when you're not living a healthy lifestyle physically, and you're trying to take care of your emotional, mental, spiritual health, right? Doing those things like meditation and, positive affirmations and journaling and gratitude still help out.
Yeah.
But it's like pouring a bucket of water on a burning building. So it's helping out a little bit, but not as much as it would if you also added in, efficient sleep, stress management, a good diet, and some exercise. So putting all those things together, combining them is, exponentially, so much better for you. Because for me, my physical health ties into my mental and emotional health, and vice versa. And so doing all those things, in combination, taking care of my physical, mental, and emotional health, it just made everything so much more effective. So if I sleep through the night and then I meditate, that right there combined is so much better than if I don't sleep through the night and I meditate. It's not as effective. It's still better than doing nothing, but doing everything together in combination and seeing the parallels between how your physical health affects your mental, emotional, and spiritual health, and vice versa. It's just so much more powerful when you go on this journey, combining, the practices and the tools and the tips and the tricks with the physical health, but then also with the mental, emotional, and spiritual health combined is so much more powerful. And this is what I'm trying to do now with my Fit to Fight the Fit brand, is help people bridge those gaps and realize that if you're going to go on a physical transformation journey, there's going to be a mental and emotional component to it. And so adding that in, instead of going to like a trainer in a gym to take care of your physical health, and then going to a doctor or a therapist or a life coach for your mental and emotional health, why not combine all that together and see the parallels of how they affect each other and how they're so connected? And that's why I am a big proponent of adding in meditation to my clients, and journaling and gratitude list and positive affirmations, and these things that we know have so many health benefits, but they don't need to be separate. They don't need to be like, these separate things that we go to, like church for spiritual health and then the gym for physical health. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like they can all be combined for a better version of you if they're all like working together, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. It's basically the difference between 2 plus 2 equals 4 versus 2 plus 2 plus 2 equals 12. It's the synergistic effect. You add all these things in, and it's going to be more than the so-called sum of the parts. So yeah, you can't get the best possible outcome without adding all of the ingredients. Having the spiritual, physical, emotional, mental health, all of that together has a much more profound effect than each one alone. And I appreciate you sharing that, because you've been there, been through it. You noticed it. You were like, holy crap. Like when I was eating all these things, I was not the best version of myself. I couldn't best, cope with whatever stressors were coming my way. I wasn't the best version of myself. But then when I changed, and I worked on all of these things together, like, holy crap, it helped, synergistically. I mean, it was such a profound impact to add all these things. And spoiler alert, you just mentioned 4 out of 5 of the topics that I cover in depth in my book, Preventable. Yeah, my book that's coming out soon, Preventable, 5 Powerful Practices to Avoid Disease and Build Unshakable Health. 4 out of 5 of the things you just mentioned right there. The 5th one, I'll just briefly say, is gut health. Gut health is super important. And that's something I found in the most recent decade of my life has made a huge impact in my health, my family's health, many thousands of others. But it was something I didn't anticipate because I wasn't, taught anything about gut health in medical school. But the cool thing is it responds to all of the things you mentioned: the sleep optimization, the stress optimization, the movement, right? Daily movement, the real foods, all those things are additive. And then the sleep, and then you throw in, optimizing your gut health, and your chances for success are freaking through the roof, So thank you for sharing that. That was amazing. And I just love, I know we're coming up on time. I'd love for you to, share any parting thoughts, and then what people can do to reach out to you, to follow you, to access your Fit to Fat to Fit and all that good stuff, Drew.
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing me on and let me talk about this stuff that I'm super passionate about, and speak about it in a way that isn't too far out there, too woo-woo, or, what I'm saying? I think it's very digestible if we look at it in a certain lens, instead of like writing it off and thinking, oh, meditation is for monks, or, it's not for me. But I think if you're open to new ideas and you've tried everything else, give this a try. I think a lot of people have tried a physical fitness approach from a place of self-hate or like self-discipline, thinking if I beat myself up more and just discipline myself and deprive myself, then I will be like this David Goggins that can do anything and push myself beyond my limits. And I think for most people that doesn't work. And my approach is like, hey, why not try self-love for a change? Why not try loving yourself first and foremost, and learn how to operate out of a place of self-love, and see if that makes the physical fitness journey a little bit easier, more manageable, versus a place of self-hate where, if your happiness is determined by the number on the scale or by getting the results, then that kind of cycle has been, you probably tried that out so many times in your life, that pattern of like, if I only got these results, then I would be happier, then I would be healthier. If I just fix my body, then I wouldn't have all these problems. But I know so many people who are super healthy that have 5% body fat or 10% body fat that look great on the outside, that still struggle with their mental health and still struggle with self-hate. So it's not this thing that we think it is. So my hope is to help people realize that they're worth it to fight, to learn how to love the process. And doing it from a place of worthiness and self-love is a game changer, in my opinion. And that's kind of what my brand is about now, is helping people learn how to operate out of a place of self-love, do the inner work first, so that the working out and the physical stuff becomes so much easier and more manageable, where you don't see it as a chore anymore, or this thing that you have to do to get this body, in hopes that people will start to love you once you have this body that will fill this void that is missing. You can learn to love yourself now as you are, as imperfect as your body is. If you learn to love yourself now and operate at a place of self-love, your ability to do the hard stuff, the hard physical stuff you're supposed to do, will be so much easier, because you'll learn to fall in love with the process of doing it, because you realize that you're worthy to do that hard process that will then bring the long-term benefits into your life. And that's kind of what my message is. People can find me online at Fit to Fat to Fit. It's all my social media handles, my website, my podcast, my book, and it's super easy to get a hold of me. So.
Yeah, awesome. Fit to Fat to Fit, amazing podcast, amazing website, so many tools there. I mean, you're just a light and such a shining, star example. Just really cool dude that has been through a lot and can really understand, not only the process, but understand, the depths of how deep this can go, and I love that you start with the self-love first, because everybody out there, if you're listening, you are worth it. You are valuable. You are perfect. Who cares if your metabolism currently isn't operating the most efficiently? You can change that. Yeah. But you're not broken as an individual. Your soul is perfect. You can, all these things will come into play together for your good if you take a moment. Take a couple of deep breaths. The meditation part, I love that. I still struggle with that. Honestly, I can't meditate for more than 15, 20 minutes without, I don't know, without somebody banging on the door. I got 6 kids. Like it's pretty legit around here. There's lots of chaos. But I found that just a couple of minutes, could be 2 minutes. Take that time to yourself. For me, I know I don't want my kids to know, but I'll just go into the bathroom for 2 minutes and I'll just sit there, close my eyes, put my hand over my heart and just take some deep breaths. It's amazing how quickly you can change your state with just a couple of deep breaths. It's amazing. Amen. And my second, big thing is just a quick bout, whatever that is. For me, it's jumping on the pull-up bar and I bang out 30 pull-ups and my whole state is completely changed. I feel like I can conquer the world after banging out 30 pull-ups. It's just like, it's amazing. Those simple things, they don't take a lot of time, but starting in the place that you've said of self-love rather than self-hate. Start with that. Love yourself. You are perfect. You are created perfectly. You're amazing. You're worth it. Like, oh my gosh, Drew, I'm so grateful to have you on the show, dude. You're such a light, such an inspiration. It's been such a pleasure, man. I can't wait to connect in person since we're both on the islands.
Yes, I'm sure.
Next time I'm in Kona, I'm definitely going to be looking you up. Or if you're on Kauai, definitely reach out to me, man. It'll be epic. Or if you go back and see family in Utah, I love to get in a bunch of ski and snowboarding sessions as well. We'll figure out a way to get together in person, man. It'd be amazing. So thank you again, Drew. You're such a blessing. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Please make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss out on any future episode. And I'd love to hear your comments and feedback. If there's any topic you'd love to hear about, you're dying to know, burning questions, please comment below and let me know what future topics are of interest to you.